Welcome back to another episode of Supergene Unleashed. I wanted to talk to everybody because January is here, and every January we witness a barrage of people who jump on the health and wellness bandwagon with high hopes of transforming their bodies, losing weight, and following specific eating habits. And as the year carries on, we see all those people fall off that bandwagon and slip into old habits, and they're unable to sustain their aspiration of achieving lasting weight loss. So today, I'm very pleased to welcome Dr. Meghan Garcia-Webb to the show. We are kicking off the new year with clarity, truth, and female empowerment, not diet culture. Dr. Meghan is triple board certified physician who blends medicine with psychology, coaching, and compassion. And she knows what really works for women, why we self-sabotage, and how we can break the cycle for good. So to get started, I want to hand it over to Meghan and ask about how you got started in this journey, because I know that you originally started as a general practitioner and now you focus specifically on weight medicine. So in a brief sentence, how did you get there, and what was the moment that you realized you wanted to focus on weight medicine?
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm delighted to be here. Yes, I worked in primary care for adults for many years. And I think it was just a culmination of and I love primary care. I love treating whatever comes in the door. I think it's so fun and exciting. But I did notice that a lot of the issues that people had, the root cause was their weight. And I am always very passionate about helping people address the root causes. So we would talk about what was going on. And I just kept having the same conversation with people over and over and over about their weight. And I thought, this is not working. As much as I want it to work, there's something missing. And so that really led me to look more into how can I most effectively treat weight. And I did my obesity medicine board certification and my lifestyle medicine certification as well.
Yeah, that's actually what I was going to ask about next, because I saw as well that you became a certified life coach. Mm-hmm. So why do you think that that was essential to treating weight loss? Because that's obviously quite different from, being a doctor and being so focused on the science of things.
It is so different. And it really felt like the missing piece for me, because coaching is really about how do you get yourself to do what you know you want to do. And I think in medicine, we talk about it a lot, but I don't really think we have very effective ways of addressing it. And this comes down to whatever field you're in, whether you're talking to patients in the emergency room or pre-op discussions, or, should you have this mole removed, right? There's so many different ways where it's really important to make sure that you're aligned with the patient and that you're really addressing their fears, but also helping them with the mental roadblocks, because a lot of people, we think we know what's going on, but it really takes somebody from outside to tell you. And so I felt like when I learned about coaching, it was the missing piece, and it really took me from being able to just kind of talk at patients to really be able to have an effective conversation in terms of what it actually entails in terms of getting them the results that they want.
Yeah, something that you just said really stood out to me, and that is that to have that outside perspective to help tell people what they should be doing, because oftentimes people can't find that for themselves. And so I think that that is really cool that you decided to blend the human element with medicine and being able to empathize with the person, but also get into their psyche and break down, the different barriers that might be holding them back. And I wanted to ask you, actually, I think you said most of your clients typically are women. Mm-hmm. And so on that note, what patterns or emotional themes have you consistently seen across them? So since you've now transitioned into this focus, have you seen anything that really stands out?
Absolutely. There are a couple big ones that come to mind. So a lot of women have this concept of like, I can't waste food, right?
Okay. I have
So
that
yeah,
actually. Oh
and
my
I
goodness.
think so many people have that, and I think there's a spectrum of that, right? Nobody wants to waste things, but I also feel like, if it's a couple bites on the plate, like, and you're full, your body's not the garbage disposal, right? So I think there's this idea of, well, I can't waste things, or if I made it and I didn't like it, that would be wasteful. And I think that really prevents women from, um, really honoring their health in a lot of ways and just kind of honoring their fullness, and saying like, you know what, like, I'm not going to finish this, or you know what, like, I know I got this glass of wine in the restaurant, but I don't really need the rest of it. I'm just going to say no. So I think it really, probably ties into a lot of, people pleasing that women have traditionally been taught too, is like, oh, well, somebody made this for you, or you bought this, or, it's there, and it shouldn't go to waste. So you need to finish it, right? So that comes up a lot for people. And a lot of women, especially moms, they're just rushing themselves with everything. And I think it's very possible to be, to have a full life, but not have the narrative of, I have, oh, I'm like, go, 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 go. Like like you're always behind for something. So I think it's very possible to do a lot of things, but do them in a way where you're not putting your own health at risk.
Okay, so those are primary themes that you see. What about like body image? Do you also see that coming out and any negative self-talk?
Yeah, I mean, there's so much negative self-talk that comes up for people, and I think whenever because, and this comes up for people whether they're on medication or they're not, and they'll a lot of times people reach their weight goal, and then we're reflecting on that, and then they're like, well, actually, now my goal is this, right? And so, which is fine, but I think whenever we're wanting to make changes with our body, I think the primary question is like, why do you want to do this? And to really think about it, because, and I think even the answer of, well, I want to feel better is kind of a non-answer, because, well, how does being this weight, how does it actually make you feel better? Like, why? Right. So digging into those kind of common reasons that sound very good, but might mask a lot of things that are going on. And, I also think where people are so tied to a number and what they make that number mean. And I think numbers are helpful, right? To be objective measures of tracking, but they are so one dimensional. And I think the closer people get to their weight, I always try to work with women on, like, how can we solidify your habits and get you doing those 100%? Whereas, living and dying by this number on the scale that is naturally going to fluctuate day to day.
Yeah, exactly. I definitely can relate to a lot of the things that you're saying and have also come across many women who associate the success of weight loss with a specific number rather than maybe focusing on body composition. And what you said about feeling better, of course, is a non-negotiable. You should want to lose the weight to feel better, but also what you're tapping into is something much deeper in terms of the science behind weight loss. And I want to cut straight to the chase actually and dig into the topic of GLP-1s, because with weight and weight management, we can't avoid this topic. And it has really exploded. And obviously, at least I would like to think that the majority of people now know that this particular medicine was never created really for weight loss from the beginning, at least from what I know. But this resounding impact that it has on weight management has really proliferated into the hands of so many people, and especially women. And I have been surprised within my own network finding out different people that have taken it or are taking it, because I just thought that it was crazy. Like, why would you start taking this? You're not even that overweight. You only maybe wanted to lose 5 or 10 pounds. So why are you all of a sudden taking this? Why wouldn't you just try to go to the gym or maybe tweak your macros a little bit? So I want to ask you directly. Obviously, they've exploded in popularity. And as a medical doctor, what is your honest viewpoint on these medications?
Yeah, I mean, for me, especially as somebody who's worked in primary care for so long, I think they're incredibly useful tools, especially when people if they have a BMI of 30 and, I'm just kind of watching it go up year after year. A lot of people at that point, they've tried a lot of things and they're very discouraged. And so and I always want people to try to make the lifestyle changes. Obviously, the way that I would love for everybody to lose weight is through healthy eating and exercise and going that route. But for some people, you're just burning daylight on their health, essentially, if you can't get their BMI lower. And so sometimes for the right patient, we prioritize the medication first and then the lifestyle changes, because also it's easier for them to go to the gym when they've lost weight, or maybe it's a lot mentally more possible for them to invest in making these changes when they can see the number going down on the scale. So overall, I think the medications are extremely positive because there is such an obesity crisis in the world, but especially in America. And it's, up until 2 or 3 years ago, it was only getting worse. And I do feel like it's one of the, there's so many systems in America that work against people to keep them from being healthy, that I do feel like the medications are one tool that we have now to fight back against that. So overall, I think they're incredibly useful, but I do think, they're not for everybody. And I do worry about, where people are getting their information from. There's a lot of misinformation out there. What kinds of medication are people getting? There's a lot of, like kind of compounded versions of the medication. And, we could probably talk for about 8 hours on this, because this also goes into like pricing and access and, who can afford them, or who can afford the FDA cleared versions. But overall, my take is they're very helpful, but you do have to be careful. They are prescription medications and they're really not for everybody.
Right. So it has to be in the right context. What do you think about women who are using them just for like losing 5 to 10 pounds or a
Yeah,
small amount of weight? I
it's a
mean,
great question, because, and I always like to think about this as like, there's nothing wrong with wanting to lose 5 or 10 pounds. I think sometimes when we think about the medication in more a cosmetic way, maybe this is like Western conditioning or something. I feel like there's this, I don't know, like trope of like women are vain or this isn't important and all that kind of stuff. And I think, like, of course, who doesn't want to look better? Who doesn't want to feel better? Absolutely nothing wrong with wanting to lose 5 or 10 pounds, especially if you really like your reason, right? But I think it's, these medications, they're not really intended for that. They're lifelong medications and they do have side effects. They definitely do not play well with everybody's digestive tract. They definitely can take some of the real enjoyment out of food, where, if that's a real clinical problem for somebody, that's great. But also, like, you may just not enjoy your meals as much. And I think for a lot of people who aren't in that category of like their weight is physically unhealthy, like that's a big trade-off. And also when I think people are in that 5 to 10 pounds, that's really where I think, you know what, there's probably a lot that can be done lifestyle wise that will make that difference and you will feel better. anyway. Like whenever we make the lifestyle changes, you always feel better, right? It's always a win-win. And then I think for women in particular, there's always like the hidden trap of the medications that are weight promoting. So there are definitely people who are on things like Prozac or Zoloft or Effexor, or there's a lot of different medications that women are started on after childbirth or in the perimenopausal stage. And they do, they don't cause a 50-pound weight gain overnight, but they can cause like the accumulation of 5 to 10 to 20 pounds over a few years. And I see that a lot, actually. People are like, I'm doing all the things, like they're really doing everything and they can't make this small amount of weight move. And a lot of times it's due to the medication. So in those circumstances, I do feel like that is a helpful place for the medication. But because it's the only way to fight fire with fire, essentially. But a lot of times people in that situation don't qualify for it either.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of people as well are almost abusing it because they want to have the quick fix when, like you said, that simple lifestyle changes would make the difference of that stubborn weight to move and be able to keep it off. Because from what I know as well, you also mentioned that it's a lifelong medicine. So I've also seen where some people start to use it and the moment they get off of it, everything that they lost just comes right back on. So for the people that are choosing to adopt GLP-1s into their lifestyle or into their protocol for weight management, what things do you recommend so that they could eventually wean off of it? And how can they have a better chance at keeping the weight off post utilizing the GLP-1s?
That's a great question. I never advise anybody to wean off of it because
Okay. Ever.
I would never plan on that. So basically,
Okay.
the first part of the first conversation I'll have with somebody about medication is, you do realize this is a lifelong medication and we're not planning on stopping it because part of the way, because it's not just that it limits someone's intake, but it really seems to affect how our brain processes energy storage and energy burning. And so in the reverse way, that weight promoting medications, like people can be doing exactly their normal everyday, living their normal everyday life. They start a particular medication and they may gain 10 pounds and nothing's really changed for them. In a similar way, these medications can help people lose weight. So just make it easier to get that weight off. And so when you take that away, it just goes back to where it was essentially. And we have good research about this, but also I see it all the time, unfortunately, if people lose access to their medication, their insurance stops covering it, or they can't take it for side effect reasons. For a lot of people, it's not overnight, but the weight does tend to come back on. So I think for anybody who that happens to, for on an unplanned, in an unplanned way, of course, you always want to make sure that you're, listening to your body, stopping when you're full, eating lots of fruits and vegetables, getting a lot of protein. But it would never surprise me if somebody was doing all the right things and the weight came back because of part of how these work.
Wow, that's interesting. That must be tough for some clients to really agree to a lifelong medication. I think it's hard to conceptualize when you're signing up for it, especially if you do have some of those side effects with, the gastrointestinal instances that you mentioned, or not really up to speed on what the other side effects are, but I could imagine that's another useful application of your life coaching degree to really talk through if this kind of a modality makes sense for that person. And I wanted to ask you, just to kind of like close out the topic on this, like, are there any red flags or, that women should look out for when they're considering this route? in terms of side effects and in terms of, potential impact on, I don't know if there's any impact on fertility or anything like that, or if age has a factor in when you would use them.
Yeah. So a big red flag is that they can sometimes interfere with birth control. So I always just tell people this is mainly looked at in tirzepatide, which is also Zepbound. But I just think, I also tell my patients who are on Wegovy, like if you're on oral contraceptives, make sure that if you have a male partner, that they're using a condom. But that's a big red flag. I think a lot of times when people get into trouble and you hear these stories that are like on the news, it's really because they haven't been monitored appropriately. So a lot of the side effects of these medications, so it's a lot of nausea, constipation, diarrhea, vomiting. Those are the big ones. Sometimes it's fatigue, but those are the really common ones that come up for people. But if those go untreated, that's when you can get into things like, a small bowel obstruction, emergency surgery, things like that. So you really want to be comfortable with whomever is prescribing this for you, that you're in contact with them regularly, that they're checking in with you regularly, that you can call them if, if something comes up or if you're not feeling well. In rare cases, these medications can cause things like pancreatitis. That's incredibly serious and can be life-threatening. So you want to, and all medications have side effects, right? Even Tylenol, ibuprofen, right? But you just want to make sure that you have a good team in place that you can contact if you're worried about, and also that have enough experience with this where you can tell them your symptoms and they have a good sense of, this is normal. Okay, this is very not normal, right?
Oh, for sure. And you touched on something that is extremely important, and that is having the right team in place and a trusted professional, because you also said these are prescription medicines. So you need to make sure that you have the right professional who truly understands the chemical interaction and how to monitor and spot any potential side effects. And that's actually a really great segue into the next topic, which is about how it seems like lately there's such a rise of what I like to call influencers in the wild, which is this whole online weight loss culture. You see different influencers promoting different programs, different tips, tricks. And obviously this is not the prescription side. So this is more in the traditional weight loss side. But, people with pretty much no credentials are, selling different detoxes, protocols, overnight transformations, and many women fall for these programs. So I wanted to ask you, what concerns you most about this trend with respect to weight loss?
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of it comes from this place of like, you're broken, you need to be fixed, which I think comes up for women in so many aspects of our lives. Like, you're broken, you need these cosmetics, like your weight is not in the right place, you need to fix it. So and you need to fix it fast, right? It's like it needs to happen immediately because otherwise you're not acceptable, right? So I think there's this narrative that's under all of these, messages that we're getting that I think is so pervasive, of like, you're just not okay the way that you are, right? And so you better fix it fast or bad things are going to happen. So anytime something sounds too good to be true, like it usually is. So, like, I do not tell people to buy supplements. I do not tell people, like, all your body wants to do is be healthy, and it is continuously detoxing itself. Like, we don't need to help it out other than like not put the toxins in, and, exercise and, try to live a healthy lifestyle. Right. So I think, these quick fixes, like and it's so much easier to take a pill than to go to the gym at 6 in the morning every day. Like, of course, that sounds so much better. And I think it naturally plays into our human need for, efficiency and getting, doing things as conveniently as possible as well. So I can understand where they're coming from. I think I've lived and breathed this for years and years and years. And truly, I feel like the only magic bullet, aside from, these new medications, is really consistency. Like, that's it, and actually that is what the literature shows as well. It's like there isn't one diet that works for absolutely everybody. When we've compared different ways of eating, keto, vegetarian, DASH diet, all these, the only thing that really holds up is how well people can stick to it. Like, did you have a plan that you liked, that you didn't want to stop after 3 months, that you could stick with? And so that is it's boring, but the boring stuff works.
Yeah, I seem to hear that a lot about consistency and that patience and time. And because to your point, the results are not going to be overnight. And it does take that consistency in a practice in terms of the way that you eat and the way that you exercise to see the results. And so I actually wanted to talk a little bit more about the food side, because you said something as well that's kind of interesting, which is that the literature talks about consistency rather than one diet versus another. And one of the trends that I've been seeing frequently online is about a focus on a more omnivore diet. So really focused on red meat and uh, the organs of the animal, liver, these kind of things. And even some people going so far as to say that you shouldn't be eating vegetables and focusing on specific set of vegetables. I think it was like zucchini and berries and honey are okay. And then a bunch of red meat and organs and things like this. So what do you typically recommend to your clients? I mean, surely, you can't say that, oh, if I'm consistently eating donuts, I'm going to lose the weight, right?
Yeah.
But there has to be some kind of healthy angle to it.
Yeah.
Is there a makeup of, macronutrients that people should place a focus on that generally yields better results and that you've seen that most people are able to stick to?
Yeah, you bring up such a great point because, the eating plan you were just talking about, I feel like, there's so many different fads, and this is like the newest fad. And then, for so many years, people were saying, well, you have to eat every 3 hours or your body's going to go into starvation mode and it's going to hold on to everything. But then we had the intermittent fasting people who were like, no, you need to not eat for like 12 hours a day or a whole day. And then your body gets more efficient. And those are completely opposed, right? And I have people who eat regular meals and lose weight, people who intermittent fast and they love it and they lose weight. So there are so many different ways for people to be healthy. And I think, for me, what I work with my clients is like, let's block out all the external noise and really start with, what do you even want? Because a lot of people have just that's never even occurred to them. Like, clearly the answer has to be out there somewhere, right? Whereas I always find that the answer is actually, like, what the answer is. We just have to get a little more specific about it. What does that look like day to day for you? And so that's what I really help my clients build, is not so much what does everybody else think I should be eating, but how do I want to live my life? What's easy for me? What do I like that also aligns with my health goals? And like, for some patients, they have a sweet tooth. And I would never tell them, like, well, we're not eating chocolate, right? Like, I think there's definitely a way to eat chocolate, eat bread. Like, so many people in the world do it. And, Switzerland, France, like, the life expectancies there are so much better than they are in America. So it can't be the food. It's really the way that we relate to the food and how we act around the food. So that's really the first place that I start. But in terms of like universal rules, yes, I agree. Like limiting ultra processed foods is always a great place to start. And also because those foods are really like designed in labs to be palatable and appetizing to people. Like they're designed to be addictive. So the more we just can, and not that, it's a crime to eat them, right? But the more we can just go in with our eyes open and be like, yeah, if I want to eat more after I have these chips, it's not a surprise. They're made like that. So limiting ultra processed foods. And then one thing that I just love to help anybody do, because I think it works for everybody, is just make half your plate leafy fruits or vegetables. You don't need to learn a bunch of new recipes. Like whatever you're eating, just shove it to the side. Make half of it fruits or vegetables, non-starchy fruits and vegetables. And, that could be a bagged salad. That could be some like 2 apples. That could be like literally fruit is so portable and does not require cooking and is like the first convenience food, right? So I think wherever people start in terms of what they like, that is one thing that I always try to add in for them because we can always eat more fruits and vegetables and they are delicious. So it's a win-win.
Yeah, I really appreciate that advice because oftentimes I think people can get bogged down with all the different rules and, oh my gosh, I'm only supposed to eat 50 grams of this particular vegetable and, 100 grams of this and whatever the quantity is that it can almost put them off from eating something healthy to begin with. So I also like that your starting point is actually asking your clients what they like to eat so that you can incorporate that because I think as well, people fall off the bandwagon because if they think, oh my gosh, I can never have cheese ever again, dairy's bad, I shouldn't be eating dairy, then they're more likely to not be able to keep up with the implementation of the healthier swaps or lifestyle adjustments.
Yeah.
So basically, if I were to ask you, you don't really think like gluten or carbs or dairy or these things are the enemy. It's just about how you approach the food, how much, and having that control, it sounds like, especially when you were talking about chocolate, it sounds like the message you're trying to get across is inserting greater control.
Yeah, I think it's not so much about willpower as it is about like tuning into your body's natural cues. Like, knowing when you're actually hungry, physically hungry versus like, our mind hunger that's always on, right? And knowing when you're actually comfortably full versus stuffed. I think that's, nobody knows that. And people just eat based on external components of, I was given this much and so I ate all of it, or I eat half of my portion, or what all these external metrics. And so that is one of the main things that I work with my clients is like where do you even start with identifying that? And also how do you structure your life differently so you can actually pay attention to these things? Because, if somebody's eating lunch and they're doing all their emails and they're, trying to pack for an upcoming trip and they're, also listening to, or watching a Netflix at the same time, like they're going to be missing those cues.
Yeah, I could see that. And the culture has definitely become very distraction orientated.
Right. Yeah.
So let's just really quickly walk through, like when a client starts to work with you, can you just kind of go through the steps and how long do you typically work with a particular client? And when their journey ends, or I don't know if it does end, what protocols do you put in place to make sure that, what you've just coached them through lasts?
Yeah, yeah, that's a great question. So, so to start, somebody would book a call with me, and we talk through what they were looking for. And I tell people that I work with people for 3 to 6 months at a time. I don't, it's not like a therapy relationship where you're not quite sure when it's going to end or what the goal, like it's very succinct. I really want people to get the results that they're looking for, learn what they're going to learn, and then graduate. So,
Okay.
um, a lot, people are usually working with me for one of two things. And they can be on medications or not on medications. Either way is totally fine. But a lot of people have what I like to call like food chaos, and they're overwhelmed. They're not sure where to start. They are eating in a way that they're really not happy with. And so I work with them to build out a plan that not only that they like and that works for them and is healthy, but then we spend the rest of the time road testing it to make sure that it works for them, because they're going to try something and then they'll be like, oh, you know what? On the weekends, this came up. And then that's where a lot of the life coaching comes in, is like, how did you sabotage yourself, right? So you have this idea, you have this way that you want to be, but then we find, in real time, why did this not work? Right. And a lot of it is just about like being curious and figuring out like these little tiny micro decisions that we make that really get us off our goals. So I work with people for 3 to 6 months at a time. And then some people I work with because they feel like they really have the food is in a good place, but they can't get themselves to the gym, or they just never thought of themselves as an exercise person. And, I think a lot of people are like, they don't want to have to hire a trainer for the rest of their life, right?
Mm-hmm.
They don't want to have to like always have an accountability partner. So I really work with them to be accountable to themselves. So it doesn't matter. Like they can work with a trainer, they cannot work with a trainer, they can travel, they can work from home, they can go to a gym, but how do we make it so that they're exercising consistently how they want to exercise? And then they can iterate that, throughout their life, but they're no longer relying on other people to complete that part of the health picture for them.
Well, that's actually what I was going to ask you, because I know that you had mentioned earlier on that diet and exercise go hand in hand for the weight loss. So when you tackle the exercise component, do you give them specific like workouts that they should do, be it strength training or cardio? Do you make those kind of recommendations, or is there more of like a guideline in terms of, finding what you like and making sure that you're fitting in this number of exercises per week, let's say?
Yeah, it really depends on the client. I mean, I'm not acting as their personal trainer, but we sometimes for people we will go over like exercises or things that especially if they're traveling, like, lists of things they could do, or things that are, if they have injuries, or, things that they want to avoid. So I definitely will do that as part of it. Um, and then a lot of it is just, everybody's got, there's so many excuses that I hear just in my day to day life in primary care. And at least here, everybody says, well, it's cold, or like, oh, I wanted to, but I'm so tired at the end of the day. And it's like, or I'm busy. Right. And if you live in the Northeast, like it's pretty much always going to be cold, right? And you're probably always going to be busy, and you're probably always going to be tired. But if you also want to exercise, like there's a way to do that, right? And so it's not just about what the exercise is, because I really felt like there's not a lack of information for people, right? Everybody knows there's so many programs out there. There's so many things people can do. There's so many free resources, paid resources, one-on-one trainers. Like there's so much, but it's like, how do I get myself to do what I actually want to do? And so that's the main thing that I work with them on.
Okay. I was going to say, like, so then would you say that food or diet has a bigger impact on weight loss than exercise. I feel like I heard once that food is 80% of it and exercise is 20% of it or something like this. I'm not sure though.
Yeah, I think, if you wanted to get the maximum effect, probably if somebody was really looking to like, how do I, improve my health today, I would focus on the food. But also the nice thing about exercise is like you immediately feel better afterwards. If you're doing it correctly, right? Like
Yeah.
exercise does give you that payoff immediately. So I don't really I never steer people to one or the other. It's for me, it's like, where do they most feel drawn to? What's the biggest problem for them? What are they most excited to work on? Because the momentum from that will feed into the next thing. But the food, if they wanted to pick one thing, I would say, it would be food.
Yeah. I feel like I've heard you can't outrun a bad diet or something like this. I think
Right.
I've
It's
heard that
absolutely
before.
true. It's absolutely
Yeah.
true.
And so, obviously this episode will be airing in January when people are looking to start, or many people really start a weight loss practice or protocol. So what would you say are the top 3 habits or any number of habits that you see in women who successfully lose weight and keep it off? Like, what can
Yeah.
listeners take away from this in terms of the habits that would be essential for them as they're thinking about a weight loss protocol?
Yeah. I would say, number one habit is continually reminding yourself that you are becoming a different person. So it's really
Okay.
about, it's not just like doing the things, but it's like, I want to become this type of person. And it's just reminding yourself of that every single day. Like, I want, even if it doesn't work out the way you wanted it to that day, is it's really creating that identity change first. And number two, I would say going into the change with curiosity and not judgment. Because whenever we're making changes, there's always this reflex of blaming ourselves or feeling a lot of shame or guilt or upset if it didn't go right. And of course, when you're making a habit change, that's going to happen. You're not going to stick the landing every single time. And so I think, um, really being curious about what didn't go the way you wanted it to go, and trying to not judge yourself is really important. So that's number two. And number three, I would say, like, get the data. So the data being like, you know, oh, I really, if somebody's thinking like, I really wanted to work out, but it just didn't happen this week. It's like, okay, well, what exactly what didn't happen, right? Like you wanted to work out 3 times and maybe you worked out once, and then like what happened specifically those other 2 times. And then I always like people to really, that's what I want people to follow as opposed to just the scale. I want them to follow the data of like, this week I exercise 3 times a week, and next week my goal is to exercise 3 times a week. And that's what I want them to track. I want them to track adherence to the habits as opposed to what was the number that I woke up with this morning. The number I want them to focus on is like, are they getting 100% of the habits that they want to put in place?
Yeah, that's really great advice and really practical information, because I think sometimes people can get hung up on, oh, I had a bad day. And then the next day they make it a bad day because they feel a bit
Right.
demotivated. So I really appreciate the idea of maybe tracking the habit and being mindful of that, especially because your weight can fluctuate from one day to the next.
I mean, so
So
many days.
before we, I know, exactly. I've really appreciated you coming on and talking today. I really just want to close out with one kind of final question about this topic. And that is, like, in your experience, what is the emotional shift that women need to make in order to step into their power when it comes to health? because earlier you were starting to tap into some subjects about people pleasing and especially busy moms.
Yeah.
So is there anything that you can leave as some final words in terms of an emotional shift that women should make when it comes to their health?
Yes, I would say the number one thing is just to remember that you are in the driver's seat of your health. Like you have 100% full autonomy in terms of your schedule, how you want to live, what you want to eat, how you want to exercise. And I think especially women, we get so caught up in like, I should do this. I have to do this. I really need to do, like, we just have this narrative of all the things that we should be doing. But I think it's so much more helpful to remind yourself, like, you can do anything you want. You don't have to do just what is prescribed, right? What other people feel like you should be doing. And you're allowed to prioritize your health. And I think a lot of times, we need to remind ourselves that, like, we not only do we need to prioritize our health, but we fully have the capacity to do that. And so I think the first step oftentimes is really thinking about, well, what does that even look like? What would it even mean to prioritize our health? Because a lot of times women haven't even thought about that. So that's where I like to start.
Yeah, I think that's extremely wonderful advice, especially because oftentimes women can feel guilty when they put themselves first, but it is important. And, we owe it to ourselves to be our best version. And that's really my aim with this podcast is to help women become their very best version. And I really appreciate the steps that you're giving or recommending that a woman takes is, before you just like pick up and launch into any health protocol, first sit down and evaluate and understand why, and really to look at, what as well you could make as some habits that last and not necessarily chase that number, as you said. Is there anything else that you would advise in terms of just one final question you would advise for anyone who is like starting this on their own? They want to see some kind of a result. They really don't have the money to afford bringing somebody on. What is just a couple of quick tips that you could offer them to get the ball rolling that would be encouraging for them to see some results? And then maybe as they, started going on, they would invest in, bringing on a professional.
Yeah. Okay. Definitely. So number one, make half your plate fruits or vegetables, non-starch fruits or vegetables. That's super easy. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. Number two, don't eat in your car. There's no reason. Like we live in a land of plenty. Everybody's going to make it from one destination to the other. You're going to make it. You don't have to eat in your car. And number three, as much as you can, just get rid of the processed foods. That doesn't mean you can't ever have, cookies or cake or anything like that. It's just that if those are foods that you like, just get better versions of them. Like if you really like cookies, don't get the like packaged, cookies that have been on the shelf for who knows how long, right? Like go to a bakery where they make cookies that are really actually good. Or buy chocolate that's like good quality chocolate, right? So I think those are all good places to start.
Well, thank you so much. And if people want to find you, where can they find you?
They can find me on my website, which is weightmediциnemd.com. And I have a link there if they want to hear more about what I do on a one-to-one level. And then they can also go to my YouTube channel, which is Weight Medicine with Dr. Meghan MD, where I talk about all things weight related all the time. There's so many videos there if they want to check them out, and especially if they have questions about medications, I go into a lot of detail there as well.
Great. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. This is great.
The information shared in this episode is for informational and educational purposes only and should not be taken as medical advice. Neither the host nor the guest are diagnosing, treating, or recommending any specific medical therapy. As always, consult your own qualified healthcare professional before making decisions about prescription medications, treatment options, or your personal health. Reliance on anything discussed in this episode is solely at your own risk.